Hello, my name is Ben and you're listening to Your Career Kit. Today we have Ellie Long, Global Inclusive Hire and Campaign Lead from Rolls-Royce, join us once again. Many students think they need direct experience for the apprenticeship, internship, placement or graduate scheme they're applying for, but that is far from true. We have a packed episode today as we discuss the ways to demonstrate key skills which you have gained from part-time jobs to help you land that full-time job. Whether you have no experience, years worth of experience, or you're unsure what to count as experience, Ellie shares her top tips to get across the most important skills for the role you're applying for. This episode is a must listen to for any school, college or university students and will help to make sure you're a standout candidate in any application process. Hello Ellie, how are you? This is the second time you're with us on the podcast. How have you been?
Hi, yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Oh, it's brilliant to have you. So today we're going to really be focusing on, sort of skills that you can gain from part-time experience. So, whether you're looking to get an apprenticeship, internship, placement or graduate scheme, it's one of those things that is often overlooked with the student experience. A lot of students have this key experience from the part-time jobs, but they sometimes think, I need relevant experience for that job. So let's just sort of jump straight into it. The main thing we're sort of looking for, I guess, is sort of those transferable skills. Whether you want to be, a doctor, an engineer, transferable skills are with any job. So, what's the importance of that to you, sort of, especially at Rolls-Royce?
Yeah, so I think throughout the pandemic, we recognised that students may have had very non-traditional experiences. You might not necessarily been able to have the same opportunities that other students have had. And actually, a lot of these experiences like part-time work or babysitting or mentorship or anything like that you've kind of done, anything I would say outside of your day-to-day normal curriculum, has got skills within it that you can talk about and you can demonstrate to an employer. So something really simple like babysitting, if you've been looking after a number of young children, think about the skills that you've used, whether that be communication, whether that be time management. I know it sounds kind of like slightly far-fetched, but as you start to think about what it is that you've done and what is you've demonstrated through that, they're all things that will show who you are as a person and the things that you've been able to do. The other example that I often talk about is that you've probably done a lot on social media. This generation does a lot on social media. You do a lot digitally. There's so many students that have got podcast channels or have got YouTube channels or do things on TikTok, and all of those things again showcase different skills like creativity that are important to employers. So really think about the things that you do outside of your day-to-day academic life and think about what it is that says about who you are and what you're good at, and therefore that will then kind of take you down the track of starting to think about their skills or qualities or attributes that I have.
Absolutely. And within your role at Rolls-Royce, I imagine you've seen hundreds if not thousands of CVs. How many do you reckon you've seen over the last few years?
Thousands, I reckon. Yeah.
Thousands.
And to be honest, they do all start to blur into one. If you think about yourself and you think I'm applying for, we'll take Rolls-Royce, you're applying for a graduate program at Rolls-Royce, and you then think about all the other people on your course, you're all going to have the same degree, you've all roughly the same modules, you're probably all coming out with about the same grade. And for us at Rolls-Royce now, we don't look at academic qualifications, so we don't ask for a certain degree classification. So again, that starts to become irrelevant. So your CV starts to look very samey. And so this is why all of that extra stuff that you do is really, really important. And so don't underestimate the value of a part-time job that you might have done for a number of years, because that really does show things that you're good at, or things that are important to you, or things that you've just learned about yourself, or even whether you hate that part-time job, it's shown you things that you don't want to get from an employer, and that gives you something that you can then talk about in an interview or an assessment center process. And so they're the things that are going to make you start to stand out. And don't think stuff that's going to make you stand out has to be this big, wacky, or singing or dancing, amazing experience that you've got. It's really simple things like the part-time job, mentoring another student, helping out with something after school, whatever it might be. They're the things that start to make your application a bit more unique to you and start to tell your story.
Absolutely. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? You mentioned the word story. I guess your CV, especially once it's paired with a cover letter and your application, needs to be that story that I guess for you as well needs to not only be sort of a portal into what that person's like, but also needs to be exciting, doesn't it? Because like you say, if you see hundreds of CVs potentially like on a daily basis, there needs to be a way that you need to actually differentiate that. So in terms of the actual skills, you said about sort of whether you're like a tutor or you do some afternoon work after school, sorry. What are those sort of key sort of five skills essentially that you think that you can actually grab from that part-time experience that you love to see on a CV?
I think there's definitely something now around kind of creativity, and I think people interpret creativity as being arts or being able to do something, painting, whatever it might be. And actually, it's about creative thinking and about thinking in a different way and being able to kind of take something and look at it in a different light. And that's something that we really value as an organization as a whole, from new talent coming in, because you're fresh, you're coming in, you're seeing things for the first time. So there's definitely something about articulating kind of creative thinking. There's definitely something around kind of being clear on what your individual purpose is. And that's really unique to each individual person. So use that part-time work that you've got, use the experiences that you've had throughout your kind of education to be able to really clearly say, this is what my purpose is and this is what excites me and this is what gets me out of bed in the morning. We definitely look for things around collaboration and teamwork. And again, that's something that a lot of people think, oh gosh, I've never worked in a work environment before. But have you been part of a sports team? Have you been part of something where you've had to do group work? All of this stuff, again, is really great examples of when you've had to collaborate towards a common goal or kind of a shared interest. Resilience is another really good one. And this is one that I know that actually this generation as a whole, all of you will have fantastic resilient skills because you've been through university or your A-levels during a global pandemic. So that is a perfect
journey.
example
Definitely,
how you've had to be resilient. And so think about during those times when you were doing homeschooling or whatever it was, how did you further educate yourself? How did you motivate yourself? All of that, again, brilliant kind of skills that you can talk about. And I think the final thing for me is really finding people that have got a passion for what it is they want to do.
100%, yeah.
And the most important thing for us now as an organization is that we talk about values and behaviors so much more than technical capability. So you might be the best engineer in the world and you could tell us absolutely everything about the nth degree of your subject, but if you don't have real passion, if you don't have real kind of drive or enthusiasm for where you want to go, and that doesn't necessarily mean you want to be the future CEO, it could mean that you really want to work on the shop floor in that really individual bit of engineering, or you're really passionate about setting something up, or being part of the STEM outreach and getting more young people into STEM, whatever that might be. Having that really clear passion and being able to really articulate that is really important.
Definitely. I think especially, like you said, articulating that, getting those skills across. I think a lot of the time, students, I was guilty of it when I was younger, especially sort of applying for other jobs in the past. A lot of the time, you will look at this part-time experience that you have and think, I can't put anything out from that. But like you said, that those 5 key skills, especially resilience, that's a huge one. I think that's especially if you can, demonstrate that in a CV or in an interview. I think it really does show sort of the person you are. I think like also links to other key sort of skills, I guess, doesn't it? Like, let's have a problem solving as well. And that's a huge thing in the workplace, in many workplaces. You could be on a shop floor in Tesco's or Sainsbury's. There's still a degree of problem solving whether you get a difficult customer, that happens on a daily basis, or, something might have set you back in a certain, there might be a big day that you remembered at work that set you back. And it's always, you sometimes got to dig deep, but, a lot of the time, as soon as you start to think about these are the key skills you need to demonstrate, once you start actually thinking about it, you can actually look back and think, oh, I've done that, I'm all good.
To your point, I think it's really hard to sometimes think of these things when you get to the interview process, because like you've never had to think about it, and all of a sudden you kind of forced to come up with the ideas. And so I always say to people, if you're kind of in your final year of university and you get to the point where you're starting to apply for opportunities or roles, just start to, it sounds really stupid, even if it's just a notes thing on your phone. If you've had a really bad day at work, just write down quickly like why it was a bad day or something that happened, or if something went really well, or you did something and you thought, oh, my manager praised me at work for X, Y, and Z. Just capture that somehow. It can literally just be a brain dump on a post-it note, but then when you come to start to pull all of this together into your application form or whatever it might be, you've got those initial ideas which would then kind of spark you thinking. So it doesn't feel like you're kind of starting from a blank piece of paper. So I'm by no way saying you've got to sit every night and write an essay or put it at work every day, but start to kind of think oh wow, that was a really terrible day because a customer got really cross at me and this went wrong and I had to try and figure this out and X, Y, and Z. But all of a sudden you've got potentially 3 brilliant examples there that you could talk about in an application or an interview process, and just capturing them quickly, I think, helps you start to pull some of this stuff together.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing, I guess, isn't it? Because, it's all well and good saying, yeah, think about this stuff on your CV, your cover letter. You could sit there for a week doing your cover letter and your CV. But I think, like you said, when it comes to an interview, you are on the spot, aren't you? So if you have, like I said, have those 3 examples there, you're definitely going to set yourself up for, a successful job application and hopefully see it through to then to actually get a job offer. In terms of skills as well, what are some skills that you find that often lack in an application from a student, whether it be a 16-year-old that's, coming out of school just on their GCSEs, or whether it be someone who's, graduate with a first class degree in, engineering. Are there any key skills you think, I really want this, but this needs developing?
Yeah, I think you've mentioned it before. I think problem solving is something that students often forget to mention, or think they don't have. And I think it's quite often because, a very generalized statement here, but the world of education, you've kind of just been taught stuff and people have just told you information and you've remembered it. And that's kind of the way it is. And actually the art of problem solving, the art of kind of critical thinking, the art of thinking, do you know what? I don't think that's right. Or I want to understand why.
Yeah.
That sort of skill set is something that I think we have to try and tease out of graduates or apprentices more once they join us, and really try and encourage them to realize that they can think in this way. It's just not how you've necessarily been taught or how you've been told to think. And so any way where you've kind of gone away and taught yourself something else off your own back, or the amount of people that have bikes or cars and you think something's gone wrong and you want to try and fix it yourself or have a go at doing it yourself, all of that kind of stuff really shows your ability to think individually, and think critically and challenge something or challenge yourself. And so trying to bring that out in your application form or through talking at an interview is really important, because that's essentially what you're going to have. You're going to be given a job and given tasks to do, and there's got to be a way of trying to figure out some of this stuff yourself when you first join. And our end part of our assessment center now has an activity that is purely focused on problem solving and critical thinking, and kind of being given a case study and materials and being able to kind of pull it apart and think for yourself. And that shifted so far away from traditional assessments, which have been very focused on knowledge and tell us what you know and how you know it. So yeah, I think that's the biggest kind of gap that a lot of students have. They just don't know they have, and so they don't talk about it.
I think, I guess, especially with university as well, is that, you're thrown into a position where you're working, with for 3 years with a lot of people you don't know previously. Well, you don't know anyone really previously, do you? When you especially that first week of freshers, I think that problem solving, in a group as well, is something that when I look back on uni, I think actually, problem solving was always there. You just, like you say, you just don't really think about it at all. And it's one of those things where once you start digging deeper, that's when you can actually almost have that sort of star technique, can't you? We'll get onto that in a bit. But, when it comes to an interview, you can really explain, the whole situation through to, this is what it was, this is what we did, this is how, this is the result of it. In terms of those sort of key jobs as well, so quickly jumping forward, are there any sort of key part-time jobs that you look at in a CV and think, right, okay, I really want to learn more about this person, or I really want to actually delve deeper into this job? So, for example, our director, whenever he's hiring an intern or, a recently graduated student, he'd love to see sort of like online tutoring. It really shows that initiative, that problem solving, that really sort of that, you want to sort of get out there, because it is almost self-employed, isn't it, a lot of the time when you're a tutor?
Yeah, I think pre-COVID, I probably would have had a very different answer to this. I think post-COVID, the most important thing for me, and I recognize this particularly from students that may come from the non-traditional backgrounds that are going into certain roles, is that you might not necessarily have been able to have what we would class as that perfect work experience. And so we've tried to move away from that. I think for me, it's making sure you've got stuff on there, and it's stuff that you've done either continuously. So it's brilliant if someone's had a part-time job for a number of years, because I think, oh, fantastic, they're going to have lots to be able to talk about in that, and they'll have lots of examples, and they can really show and demonstrate a lot of skills through that experience. Or it's people that have gone, oh, I've done something and then that's not quite worked, so I've gone and tried something else. And it's people that have got then lots of little things that they can talk about how they've explored what it is they're interested in, or trying to kind of get that experience. And so ideally it'd be brilliant if you applied for a job where your part-time work or your experience somehow linked to the industry or the sector that you wanted to get in. But I think us big employers now recognise that that's not always possible because of the pandemic and everything that's happened. And so what the most important thing for me is being able to see candidates who have got more than just their academic qualifications, and more than just, oh, well, I went to university and I was part of a sports team and that's me. It's actually, do you know what? I did all of that and that's brilliant, but also I did voluntary work, or I tutored, or I had a part-time job in Tesco, whatever it is. It's being able to have that and talk about how that's developed you as a person.
Yeah. So I guess, like I said, I guess there's no sort of set job, so to say. I guess it's just demonstrate that experience. So I guess looking back from my experience as well, in terms of, I was at Tesco for must have been about 3 years. I think over that time I developed massively. You know, I was doing my A levels at the time as well. Had a gap year from university as well, and was at university. And each of those sort of 3 years, different stages of my life. And I guess when you're in that one role as well, you sort of develop with the people around you. You know, you get more comfortable with your job. You can have that more sort of problem solving, and you sort of hit the nail on the head as well. I guess it's difficult to have that job that links directly to your job that you want to do. You know, whether you want to be, like I said, an engineer, like you might not always be able to get that experience, or it might be easier for some jobs, like marketing, for example. Some people can get sort of marketing experience. Like my school did a work experience week, and I worked at Nutricia, so division of Danone, and we sort of looking back on that was really beneficial for me. Although it was only a week, I sort of got that experience that I was able to actually demonstrate in the interview that I had with E4S. Said, look, you know, it was only a week, but, you know, this experience, this is what I was working on, the project I was doing. This is what I think, I could bring to the team from that. And like you said, it's just about developing those skills that you have and sort of digging deep to find out, right, okay, well, those experience might actually be, one-to-one, almost a close link, or might not be. Everything's always there, isn't it? And I think especially if you can articulate that in an interview or things like that, it can be really, really beneficial. In terms of sort of experience that you might look for compared to, an apprenticeship versus someone who's going for a graduate job, is there quite a big difference there? Because, that's quite a big age gap. Because I guess potentially there could be 3 years of developing between that, whether you've left sixth form or GCSE, or sort of you graduated.
Yeah, absolutely. And we completely recognise, because we even take apprentices post 16.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah.
Rolls-Royce. And so we completely recognise the experience that a 16 or 17-year-old might have approached to someone who might have even done a master's, so it could be kind of 23, 24, is completely different. And so, we always kind of recognise that, actually, do you know what, if you're coming at 16, 17, you're not going to have ideas of a part-time job or lots of experience, but there's still so many things as an apprentice that you can draw upon. And I think this is where some of the things of, actually, did you go to Brownies, for example, and have you gone back and helped out, or have you done things at school where you've been given an additional level of responsibility, or you've given, tours to prospective students, or you've acted as buddies in sixth form to the year sevens, whatever that might be. All of that is absolutely fantastic to bring out and again to talk about. So it's just thinking about, if I take out of my day-to-day the stuff that I normally do, I have to go to university, or I have to go to school, and I have my lectures and my classes and X, Y, and Z. What is all the other stuff that you do around that? And there'll be all your social things, but there will be other things that you do. And it might be that actually you're really into TED Talks, and you listen to a certain set of TED Talks, and that's led you down the route of why you now know you want to go into that industry or that sector. That's a brilliant example of how you've done self-learning and self-development. You can articulate what your motivations, your ambitions are. And so even things like that you can bring out and you can draw out as examples in interviews.
Definitely. I think, like you said about, having those sort of year 7 buddy, year 6 buddies, for example, things like that, once they progress from. I think we had a program similar at my school. It's like you're a mentor over the summer. I think a lot of those opportunities for sort of school students, especially when they go into, whether it be writing a personal statement or applying for an apprenticeship, it's a lot of those experiences where a teacher or your tutor might sort of say, oh, you've got this experience, but your hand up if you want to do it. A lot of people might shy away from that, isn't it? And I think those experiences are daunting at first, especially when you're, you might be the only one doing it out of your friendship group. But I think really sort of looking back on my time at school, I was happy with the opportunities I did, but there's always more, isn't there? There's always more that you could do to get yourself out there, get those extracurricular activities. And, years down the line, you reap those rewards, because not only will you be able to get a head start in your career by getting not necessarily a head start, but you can get prepared quite early. You can get an apprenticeship, or you can know the route you want, and you get a graduate job. All those things come back to what you did earlier in life. And I think it's almost like a snowball effect, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, it's thinking about, actually, there are opportunities that you might just think, oh, it's something that I do, but it genuinely is something that we want to talk about. I remember doing some mock interviews it's probably a year ago now with one of the local schools near Rolls-Royce, and one of the students she was struggling to come up with examples. So we were talking about what she did in her spare time, and she was talking about how actually in her local church she helped out give the teas and coffees out at the end, and she did prep with making sure everyone had the right books at the start and all of this. And I said, you know what, that's a fantastic example. I said that's something that's actually quite unique and individual. I said it's not something that loads of other students have talked about, and so it sticks in people's minds a bit more when you're in assessment processes. But this is a brilliant example that shows the fact that you've got commitment. You've had to turn up early to something on a Sunday. You're part of a team. You started off doing it at whatever age, you've continued, and now you've trained some of the other young people in the church that want to be involved in the kind of the extra support. And I said, and she just hadn't realized that, and she just hadn't clocked, and she just thought that's something I can't talk about. And so again, it's thinking about all of those extra little components of your life where you do all of these little additional things. The other example that I always say to people is when people have said, oh, well, I go and help X, Y, and Z do their shopping, or during lockdown, I helped whoever, I went and collected their medication for them. And again, they're all such fantastic examples of how you've demonstrated things like empathy or care or whatever it is. If you want to go into a caring role, if you want to go into nursing, what a brilliant example to kind of link to. So really think about the things that you've got and the experiences, and don't kind of think, oh, none of my friends do that and they're all talking about Duke of Edinburgh, so my example doesn't matter as much. Don't worry about that. Like, if you've done D of E, brilliant, that's a great example. If you're on the sports team, brilliant, great example. But actually, if you helped out at Brownies, that's also a great example. If you helped out at your local church or community centre, also a brilliant example. So think about what's unique to you, rather than thinking, if my friends haven't done that, so that doesn't count, or that's not as valid or important.
I think that's a huge thing as well, isn't it? Especially at sort of assessment centres, when you sort of speak to other people. I had one years ago, it must have been 2018 it was, so, you know, way before the pandemic. And a lot of people would say, oh, I've done this experience and I've done all of this. And you're sat there like, oh, okay, I've got experience, but it's not as good as that. And I think a lot of the time it's just ignoring, you know, shutting out everyone else and just thinking, right, you are the focus of this assessment, you know, especially if you've got an interview, you're at an assessment centre, they're already interested in you. And that's the thing that I always tell myself and always say to my friends as well, like, if they've invited you to a next stage, like, they're interested in you. So just make sure that you really play on the strengths that you have. You might not think you have them, but you really are sort of a star candidate already. And in terms of actually demonstrating those key skills, you know, the transferable skills, we got the STAR technique, haven't we? Is that something that Rolls-Royce, you know, you still look at, or are there other sort of methods that you prefer?
Yeah, so we still a really great structure, I think, for students when they're trying to articulate an example, because it means that you get all of the information in that helps us go, this person can demonstrate that skill or behaviour. And so what some students don't realise is that our assessors, when they ask you that question, tell us about a time that, I don't know, you've had to deal with a difficult customer or something. We have behind that question boxes and boxes of all of these different scoring things that we've got to look for in someone's example. And so something like the STAR technique, which stands for situation, task, action, result, gives you a really nice format to being able to talk about your example, to mean that we can then go down that list and kind of tick everything off. And so I always do still say to students, and I even say it to professionals and people my age that go for jobs and asking for tips, to say it's a really great way of just really formally structuring what it is you want to say, an example you want to say. But what we've also done in our interviews this kind of this year and over the past kind of couple of months is we've realized that, again, and I come back to the whole pandemic thing, is that students don't necessarily have examples for every single skill that we're now looking for. We can sometimes have 8 to 10 questions in an interview, which sounds really daunting, that all of a sudden you've got to have like 10 different examples to try and rely upon. And so we not only ask questions that kind of lead you down a route of really giving us that example, but we also have some questions, so we have the opportunity where if students don't have an example, they can talk to us about why that skill might be really important to them, or why they think it's important to Rolls-Royce. And so we give you that opportunity too. And so I also would encourage people, when they're kind of thinking or preparing, if you're thinking about like those top skills, teamwork or collaboration or resilience, also think about answering the question about why it might be important to the company, and why you might have to use it in your apprenticeship or your grad scheme, because that's the other route that we sometimes now kind of will take questions down in interviews, to give you the opportunity and kind of to say, actually, do you know what? I've not had loads of examples of having to deal with a really difficult customer, for example, but actually, do you know what? I know why customer service would be really important to Tesco, and this is why it's really important. And this is how I think I would act in that situation, given the research that I've done on your company and my skills or my strengths or whatever. And so, yeah, I'd kind of get people to think about it in that way, as well as just kind of doing the traditional STAR technique.
Yeah. So final sort of question, I guess now, imagine I'm sat in front of you, you've invited me to an interview. I've got absolutely no experience. What would you say to someone like, well, what should I do? Sort of, I've only got, university experience. What should I do in order to make sure that, I'm that standout candidate for you? I haven't got any part-time experience. I haven't got any internships. It's just me, just university. What's sort of the best approach?
Yeah, so I'd say I wouldn't necessarily worry about the internships and part-time work, because we all know that can sometimes be difficult. And sometimes that's the first hurdle for people is they can't get a job because they haven't got the experience, and then they can't get the job. And it drives me mad when you see adverts, for kind of part-time work for students, and it's asking for years worth of experience in the sector.
Yeah.
This is someone's chance to try and get that experience. But anyway, so yeah, I'd say if you want to go down that route and you want to try and find yourself a part-time job, brilliant, go for it. But I'd actually say explore other opportunities like volunteering work. There will be someone within your university or a society or someone in the career service that looks after volunteering, and there will be hosts of opportunities, from longer term things to day one-off activities that you could get involved in, which will demonstrate so many different skills. And also show that you're quite willing to kind of get involved and get stuck into something that might not have the reward of pay, or might not actually have a direct benefit to you, and you're doing something for someone else, and you're working in probably quite diverse teams with people from very different backgrounds. So I would always say to students, and again, it's something that we look for on CVs, is how have people been involved in some form of voluntary work? If you're not at university or at a school, local churches or community groups and whatever, again, are always kind of looking for voluntary work. And I can guarantee 9 times out of 10 you'll get the opportunity, because they're desperate for volunteers and people really want really want the help. So yeah, that is definitely my first route. The second thing would be then to think about whether you can get involved, what you can get involved in outside of your course. So does your course look at things like course representatives to kind of be involved in some of the conversations they have with lecturers about shaping the direction of the course? Is there a society that links to your kind of career ambitions or the sector that you want to go into? So you might be studying, I don't know, a geography degree, but actually you really want to get into business. So do they have like a women in business society, for example, that you could join? And how could you then be involved in that? Could you be the secretary, or could you help organize the meetings or find guest speakers or whatever it is? So I then start to think about the other stuff that links to your course and your university and all of that. And if that kind of all else fails, there will be other opportunities, from mentoring students to being involved in something with your old school or something like that, going back and giving a career talk that you'll be able to start to draw upon. And what you'll find is maybe when you've tapped into one or two of these opportunities, it becomes more obvious where other
definitely
are, and how you can then get involved. Once you volunteered once in that charity shop, all of a sudden there's lots of other ways that you can kind of get involved and work with them. And so it's kind of taking that first step, I think, and accepting that it might not be the most funnest day. You might not love it, but actually you'll learn something about yourself, and you'll have an example that you can then use and talk about when you apply for that role.
It's always that learning aspect, isn't it? Always need to be open to learning.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much. You've been absolutely amazing, as per the last episode. Any final thoughts? Anything to add? I mean, you've covered everything perfectly.
I think my final piece of advice is there's no one route to a successful career, and there's no one perfect right CV. I think graduates and apprentices think that, and they think that it's got to be perfect, it's got to have certain aspects, and that we're comparing them. And actually, we don't compare you against anyone else that's applied. We kind of just look at whether you're the right person to fit us. And so don't look at competition, don't panic that you've not got it all figured out, don't think you need a 10-year life plan sussed out and you know exactly where it is you want to go. Just use all of those experiences that you've got. If you feel like you need to get more, draw on the different places that you can get them from, and shape your direction of your career and what you want it to be. There's no perfect or right answer, and that's absolutely okay, and we know that as employers.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you once again. We kept this episode a lot shorter than last time, but yeah, you've been amazing. Thank you very much, Ellie.
No, that's all right. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. We hope you enjoyed listening and picked up some valuable tips or advice. If you did enjoy, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. If you're looking for student jobs, from part-time jobs, gap year roles, apprenticeships, internships, placements, or graduate roles, head to e4s.co.uk. See you next time.